And we are rolling.
There you are. Thank you all for tuning in. I know that those of you who've been listening intently know that we are on a soft schedule that we've been able to keep every Wednesday at 4 Pacific, 5 Mountain, 6 Central, and 7 Eastern. We will come to you live unless we say otherwise. Sometimes we might have to rearrange that. But happy Kile. Lila Daya Yahipalo, I greet you all as friends. Kola Iyuha Ichichab. I'm grateful to be reporting live from the sacred Black Hills of the Ocheti Shakoi, also known as the Republic of Lakota. Today is April 7th. It's a Wednesday. And again, thank you all for joining. I don't even think we were able to get a flyer out, possibly, but that is only because, okay, we did. I'm getting messages that we were able to get a flyer out. So you're able to see that we have a special evening planned for you. And I do very much appreciate everyone who tunes in, everyone who watches the show, everyone who comments. We do appreciate it when you let us know what you're thinking. If you have ideas for the show, about the show, we encourage you to like, comment, as well as share, whether you're watching on Lakota Law's stream, Last Real Indians, my personal stream or public stream, Chase Iron Eyes, on YouTube or on Facebook. We intend to keep growing truth, accuracy, and critical thought concerning issues of the day. You know, wherever indigeneity intersects with the mainstream, you will find us there expressing ourselves and bringing to you the latest. We feel that this sort of perspective is a key to our proper growth and an informed evolution. And I know I'm here for it. I know you're here for it. But before we get to tonight's show, I do want to give a quick shout out to a couple of guests who were on a week ago today. That is Ruth Buffalo and Billy Joe B. Healer. If you remember, Ruth Buffalo is the state representative from District 27 in North Dakota, and they were on with us last week advocating for the passage of Senate Bill 2304. And it's always a fight, but when we organize, we win. And because Ruth Buffalo is now one of the state representatives in North Dakota, she replaced a guy named L. Carlson in the Fargo, North Dakota district, District 27. She became the first Native woman in history to serve North Dakota's state legislature. And she wrote the first draft of this bill that is now called Senate Bill 2304. This bill will require Indigenous history to be taught in North Dakota schools. Lord knows we all need this history, because it's not just history, it's all reality. And so I want to again say thank you to Representative Buffalo and Billy Joe B. Healer and everybody who was there throughout the past week and even longer, working extremely hard to create this kind of change that we so desperately need. Tonight's show is going to cover some key areas that we were able to kind of assess and take stock of how it's impacting Indian country. And the first is, of course, the recent Washington, D.C. actions concerning NoDAPL and Line 3, as well as Keystone XL and other pipelines affecting indigenous country. We're also going to talk about Secretary of the Interior Deb Haaland's recent MMIW focus, and most people know what MMIW means, missing and murdered indigenous women. It's also called MMIP, missing and murdered indigenous peoples or persons. And we're also going to have a special guest with us tonight to talk about recent developments concerning Indian mascots or native mascots. And then I'll close it out by highlighting something going on in Montana concerning native voting rights struggles. That struggle surely seems to never end. But the NoDAPL Line 3 actions that took place in Washington, D.C. deserve special mention, a special highlight. And I'll take a look at what do we got here? Okay, yes, sorry. I didn't realize we're cutting right to the chase here. Let me dig right in. I want to say thank you to everyone who was at DC and the Line 3 and DAPL actions out there in Washington just recently. That is specifically, I want to say thank you to the young people of Standing Rock and the Cheyenne River Sioux Nations who involve themselves in a die-in, as you can see on the screen there. But these children do not know the kind of peace that they deserve to know, because people like Kelsey Warren and Donald Trump violated their rights and rammed this pipeline right through our homelands. And through this pipeline, the Dakota Access Pipeline, oil still flows illegally. A group of indigenous youth rallied at the Capitol to deliver over 400,000 petitions to the Army Corps of Engineers and President Biden, telling them to shut down the Dakota Access Pipeline and stop Line 3 from being built through ancestral Anishinaabe land and waters. The organizers of that action are calling on Biden to make good on his promise to build back fossil-free by shutting down these dangerous, extractive, treaty-violating oil pipelines. I saw Cheyenne River Grassroots Collective, as well as 2KC Media, were on site. They were able to go live with Mark Ruffalo, and I wanted to see if we could roll in a little video here from that day, just to give them some highlights.
They are not upholding the law, which is the supreme law of the land. And yep, we will be here to fight, to continue to fight the good fight on Chumaka for all walks of life, for the generations to come.
All right, we're all joining in together. This is a worldwide movement. It doesn't stop here. We're asking President Biden to do the right thing. The way you're fighting this is the good way. It isn't harming people. It's protecting what we have that we know that we must have to live. So I really appreciate it. I really appreciate the work you're doing.
Thank
Lots
you.
of love.
I want to thank everybody for their tireless energy and their advocacy, not just Mark Ruffalo and people like Charlene Woodley or Ezra Miller, but people like Tashina Sapawi, Oscar High Elk, Jacelyn Charger, the people who sometimes, they don't get highlighted. They don't get the recognition because they're also not in it for that, but they're making sacrifices. And a lot of us know what it's like to make those sacrifices. And it's, you deserve to be mentioned, and you deserve to know that your sacrifice and your advocacy is leading to change, and the kind of change that put Deb Haaland in the Secretary of Interior's office, in the cabinet level position. And I want to pivot to Deb Haaland. She's been in recent headlines. You might have seen on April 1st, Secretary of Interior Deb Haaland, the first Indigenous woman to ever hold a U.S. cabinet level position, has not wasted any time in taking action and implementing policy. On April 1st, she announced that she would create a unit under the Bureau of Indian Affairs to investigate MMIW, MMIP, missing and murdered Indigenous women and people. While data is lacking on MMIW, Indigenous people in the United States and Canada are disproportionately impacted by this violence. And it hits so close to home out here. For sure, Larissa Lonehill from the Pine Ridge Reservation comes to mind. Selena Not Afraid from the Crow Nation, a 16-year-old girl who was found out in the cold and nobody was arrested. I don't know if any leads exist, but people are living their lives walking around guilty with blood on their hands, and we have got to zero in on them. This cannot be allowed, where our young people, our young women go missing, and it just stays like that. I don't know what the fix is, but in Indian country, people are now working extremely hard to make change happen. It's horrific how common missing and murdered or disappeared relatives are in any part of Indigenous country, and from any of our families, from the Northern Plains to the coasts, from Canada to all the way south to the border between Mexico and the United States. Native women are 10 times more likely to be murdered than the national average. Homicides are the number 3 cause of death for Indigenous women age 10 to 24, according to the CDC. 1 out of every 3 Native women will suffer a sexual assault during their lifetimes. 1 out of 3. Now, Haaland is calling for all hands on deck to assist tribal nations in this effort, saying the new unit will provide the resources and leadership to prioritize the cases and coordinate resources to make sure people are held accountable and to provide closure. Additionally, in South Dakota, State Legislative Rep. Puri Pourier has had a bill to establish an office under the South Dakota Attorney General. She's had that succeed. It was signed by South Dakota's governor, and the purpose of this bill is just like Deb Haaland, to coordinate and train law enforcement and other agencies in multiple jurisdictions in what is now called South Dakota. Representative Pourier notes 77 out of 179 missing persons in South Dakota are Indigenous. That means that almost a full 50% of all missing people in South Dakota are Native. Governor Noem has signed this bill into law, which will no doubt count as a plus, as a redemptive factor in her final judgment, given all the shenanigans and deaths that have been caused by COVID from negligent and irresponsible leaders who've let these deaths happen because they refuse to address them. And hold up, I'm getting a signal from control that I'm beginning to propagandize, that it might be coming a bit too opinionated. There's a little indicator on the screen here, but thank you for your patience and your grace, everybody who tunes in. I know you feel just as passionate as I do, and I do thank you for giving us that leniency. But I also want to pivot to the subject matter that has brought a special friend, a special mentor, Charlene Teters, onto the show tonight. And that is the ever-present challenge and fight to reassert our agency. Agency matters. that could be a hashtag. What is agency? You know, I hear this word and I know that sometimes these concepts and these struggles are seen largely as academic. And so you might want to check agency out and find out what that is in your own terms. But it is the right, the ability to determine our own portrayal, the right to tell our own stories. And natives, indigenous peoples, have not had agency for a couple centuries, sometimes a couple few centuries. We've existed only in the imagination of the European American. We've only existed in certain containable motifs, only in certain ways that colonizers are comfortable with. And sometimes that means that we are dying in a John Wayne Western movie when production offers $50 for every native who gets shot off their horse. You know, we'll be hitting the deck because that's $50. By the way, check this development with the Cleveland Indians. They are now banning face paint and headdresses in their stadium. They've also banned Chief Wahoo. They have not dropped the Indians' name, but they've taken it off uniforms. I mean, all these lengths they're willing to go to keep their name. I mean, you couldn't get more weaselly if you were an attorney. And I apologize to all my colleagues out there, but I've been personally involved in the demascotization of Native people since 1997, when I first matriculated at the University of North Dakota. There, I first articulated my beginning thoughts on these issues. I remember I was just 19 years old, and I just viewed Fighting Over Sioux, a new film by Matt Fern, released on Vimeo On Demand. I suggest you go copy a copy. It is $30, but it's an independently released film, and we got to support our independent artist. I hope it goes platinum, brother. But let's bring it back to center. We're about to bring Charlene Teters on, and I want to look at how this all got started, because if you remember, there was a film called In Whose Honor, and Charlene was there at the beginning of this struggle, and we're the second, third, fourth, fifth iterations of reclaiming our agency. But in order to kind of set the stage, I'd like to roll in a clip from In Whose Honor before we bring Charlene on.
Chief Illiniwek has been part of the University of Illinois for 70 years. Dancing at halftime of home football and basketball games, the chief has become a crowd favorite.
He's a focal point. He draws the community, the student body, the faculty together.
I've seen the performance many, many times and have found it nothing but inspiring.
Little was heard from American Indians about their feelings on the chief. But that all changed one night in 1989 when a Spokane Indian graduate student and a mother of two was asked by her children to take them to a basketball game.
I got tickets to the game, and I tried to prepare them ahead of time of what they were going to see there. You know, they have this Indian mascot, as you know. They wear paint. Some people wear feathers. You know, they have war chants. They have, just try to go through all the things that they would experience there. So, you know, you just have to ignore that, you know, to just enjoy the game.
Illinois, baby! Yeah, Illinois!
It was when the chief came out, and I'd never seen him before. Didn't know at all what he looked like, what he wore. You know, I just heard that the chief comes out and does what's billed as an authentic dance. And he came out wearing that buckskin, really a beautiful buckskin, wearing what looked like real eagle feathers all the way to the ground. And of course the fans go into a frenzy, and all around us there were these people standing in their seats, yelling, the chief, you know. And it was, my kids, just sank in their seats. And I knew that I couldn't be here and not address that issue.
We have a rich heritage in this country, especially over the past few decades, of protecting minority rights. And I think that that's important that we continue to do that. But minority rights aren't always right.
My people paid with their blood to have anything left. And so I have to guard it and protect it so that we have it for those generations yet unborn. And I owe it to those. I owe it to my children. I owe it to myself.
Wow. I don't know when that film was made, Charlene, and welcome to the show, but that is powerful. Just kind of being able to go and review that, hearing that guy say that minority rights aren't always right. First, welcome to the show. If you want to introduce yourself and just let us know what you've been up to lately, that would be great.
Okay. Well, that was life-changing. I went to the University of Illinois back in, let's see now, that would be 88 through 91. And, at that time, I didn't ask the question when I was recruited to the University of Illinois, oh, by the way, what's your mascot? Because who would think you need to ask that question? Because universities really should be places where all people's identity is respected. And of course, what we saw in the community was anything but respectful and honoring of Native people. It was, in fact, a very hostile environment for Native people. So from that time, it had an impact on my own artwork. I started doing installation work that was about trying to make our voice bigger. So I have a whole body of work that's about that issue. And from there, I came back to the IAIA, where I taught for 17 years, and then I was the academic dean for 5 years, and I just retired. So, this was, that time period is really quite life-changing. Both of my kids, who were in junior high and high school at the time, have grown up to be these really incredible Native activists in their own way, because when you find yourself in the middle of a struggle like that, and you have essentially just offered yourself, as, that, whatever happens, you offer yourself, and you're willing to sacrifice your student status or whatever. If you survive it, you become stronger in some ways. And, my daughter is an epidemiologist and a research scientist who has looked at how racism impacts even the health that we get, and my son, who works with mental health issues. So it's life-changing. We still, unfortunately, are dealing with this issue, meaning that the quality of the debate is pretty much the same. I mean, if you talk to people today, they're almost saying the same things they did way back in the day.
Right.
So I'm sure you've heard a lot of the same things that was said to me back then.
I believe it might have been in whose honor somewhere, and you can correct me if I am wrong, but when I went to the University of North Dakota at 19 years old, coming from the Standing Rock Reservation, and I forgot to mention that Charlene is a member of the Spokane Tribal
Yep.
Nation. I saw the flag back there, and I was like, "Oh, dang, we didn't say that."
Yeah, I
But
forgot too. That's actually my bad.
no worries. I remember coming from the reservation and not really formulating thoughts on indigenous mascotry or anything like that. Going to the university, just trying to seek a higher education and trying to pursue some of my dreams. And I remember sitting in the class, one of the first couple weeks that I was there, And for some reason, these Indian mascots always hit the news. So something came into the news, and the professor picks out one of the brown people in the class and says, "Look at Chase, what do you think about the Fighting Sioux mascot issue?" And I remember thinking, I don't know what to think yet. Give me a week on that. And then I went and read the Association of American Indian Physicians had some publications out at that time. And this would have been in 1997, 1998. And I look back, and I guess you don't go anywhere without purpose. It was no accident that you ended up at the Fighting Illini. But could you talk about, what that meant to you? Or and that, this is what I mean by, correct me if I'm wrong, but you said that you might not have taken your family there, because I know exactly what that feels like to have your children, impressionable young spirits interpreting and perceiving these very degenerative and damaging imagery, impacting the way we build ourselves up. So, what is the state? When was the Chief Illinois retired? And what are your thoughts on that after this number of years?
Well, okay, so, when I went there, I didn't go there to cause trouble. I went there to get an education, and boy, did I get an education. Because I, like you, I was not trying to, I was just trying to be a good student, and found myself in the middle of this debate, and they wouldn't let you have, be quiet. You were going to be asked about this and asked about it and asked again and again, and then your treatment depends on whether you're a good Indian or a bad Indian. You're a good Indian if you think it's fine, and you're a bad Indian if you have a problem with, controlling, who we are. Our names for ourselves is important. Our ability to practice our religious practices without interference. I mean, all of that. So we were not allowed to be, to just be quiet about it. We were forced to have an opinion, and then you're treated accordingly. Are you a good Indian? Are you a bad Indian? So I'm sure you were treated as a bad Indian on your campus.
I did not know. I certainly did not grasp the fact that we were carrying on those struggles against those forces, those assimilative, that were designed to completely absorb us. When I watched the Fighting Sioux film, Fighting Over Sioux, there's footage in there from 1997 and 1998 that I didn't know existed, of a 19, 20-year-old me with some of our elders from the Standing Rock Nation, others who came to have our backs. And I remember there's not a lot of people that supported us at the University of North Dakota. I think the only tried and true crew that we could depend on, this was before it was called LGBTQ+. They just called the 10% society. But we could always count on them to have our backs, because I think they understood where we were coming from. But what if you could recall, like, how many people were helping you organize? How did you build solidarity, or how did it feel in them early years? Because it's from 89 to 2007 when the NCAA stepped in and declared to be a reality what we've always known. They vindicated everybody who had struggled through these challenges in saying that these mascots are creating a hostile and abusive learning environment. Like, can you just kind of, I don't know if things happened that were cringeworthy, or it just seemed like you were sticking out like a sore thumb at University of Illinois. And I just want to give you a chance to talk about anything you might remember from those early days.
Well, I was recruited along with two other Native students, from the Osage Nation and from the Choctaw Nation. They were men. And the three of us came from our community. So we weren't somebody who thought we were Indian back there. We came from our community. So what we were seeing in the campus town was it was cringeworthy. There was a bar called Home of the Drinking Illini where they had this falling down drunken Indian over and over again. It was, cartoon, big nose, crooked feather, broken feather, buck teeth falling down over and over again. And this is where the fraternity brothers would go and put on their paper headdresses to go and act out their negative stereotypes of our men. There was a sorority that had the Miss Illini Squaw contest, and they would compete against each other wearing these lusty, busty, sort of revealing outfits because that was their stereotype of Native people. So, it became a platform for where all of these things were being acted out in the public. And because there was no Native community there present to challenge it, Illinois is one of those places where there was where we were removed. So the Indian community was small. So it was very difficult to feel safe there. It was very difficult to it was a hostile environment for trying to learn because we were just there to get our advanced degree. It was a dream come true that turned into a nightmare. My children also had to deal with that stuff too. They couldn't leave the safety of their home without having to deal with these antics that are being played out in the community. It's on everything. It's on toilet paper. It's on our medicine bottles. It's in Wendy's when you go to get a quick bite. It's everywhere. It's on the bank, so there was no safe place for us to go.
Wow, it is like that in my experience too with the fighting Sioux. It's almost at a fanatical level. And before you came on in the film, in whose honor, you hear officials from the university saying things like, Chief Elenowik is the focal point. He's something that united us. He's something that inspired us. And that to me evidences what we're all fighting to when we're fighting to reclaim our agency. That means that there is a colonial worldview, a colonial lens that sees itself. If I'm a colonizer, I get to be the adventurer. I get to be the explorer, the discoverer, the conqueror. And the Indians, that's the last thing I want to see is Indians who are upright, looking me straight in the eye, and who are able to deconstruct this programming that I've designed for them to be the savage, the barbarian, the heathen, the uncivilized. And to hear those University of Illinois people say that Chief Elenowik provides a focal point, something for us to unite around, speaks volumes about this country's settler cultural mythology in how they see themselves in relation to us. But I wanted to, just get your thoughts on the progress that we've made. And a man had to die for this. After George Floyd was murdered by Officer Derek Chauvin, the whole country lit aflame. As a result of all of this pressure, the Washington R words were finally done away with. And I don't know how many schools are out there that carry Indigenous mascots. I don't know how many organizations, but what is your sense about the progress and the evolution that is happening? What is your sense of that? Where do you see it going? Do you see it expressing itself in other areas, or how is it impacting the work you're doing now?
Let me just say that, back in the day when I was, standing with 6 students, out there outside of the where they're playing basketball, it's really grown. And I have to say that I had some wonderful mentors that helped me organize on the ground. That would be American Indian Movement. People came in, Vernon Belcourt, Michael Haney, primarily.
Wow.
And I also had Kwame Ture came in. Kwame, you may know him as Stokely Carmichael, came in and stood with us there and used his position basically to challenge his own community. Because we have to understand this is not just a Native issue, this is an issue of human rights. And until everybody's empowered to deal with it, they'll stand back and let Native people try to deal with it. So Kwame was really instrumental in coming to campus, meeting with students, putting me forward, and lifting me to leadership, and then coming in behind me and he came in and he said to his community, if this is an issue for Native people, this is an issue for you. And if you consider yourself an anti-racist, then this is your issue too. So I had these incredible mentors, that lifted me to leadership and really broadened that lens.
Wow. I never could have guessed that Kwame Ture would have had a role in deconstructing the Fighting Illini. It's the same at the Washington R word. You saw in the film that they're so confident. The colonizer is so confident in the place that we were meant to occupy in their imagination. They never would have thought that the R word would have been dropped. I mean, you remember Suzanne Shown Harjo, Vine Deloria, Amanda Black. Of course, there's multiple lawsuits on, that textbook racist slur. But it took synergy. It took Black Lives Matter to have our backs. And now even our white allies, our European American allies, who are not racist, who are the majority of this country. When I say non-racist people, I feel that we are in different ground right now because of your struggles, because of your sacrifices. And those are very real sacrifices. Sometimes even our children, through the Dakota Access Pipeline, they had to see their mom get arrested. They have to navigate that and understand for themselves, why are we always having to fight against these oppressive forces? But we have a video, Charlene, that I want to roll in so that we can take a look at just kind of where we're still struggling. So Control, if you guys have that.
Offensively dressed, first of all. Most of the people that come through here are difficult to talk to.
Why is it the only time you decide to protest about Chief Wahoo?
This isn't the only time. We deal with the academics, we talk to people, we talk to people about it. That's where the change is going to come. Not with drunks, not with people. You guys are fans. You guys are brought up believing that this is honoring us. You guys were brought up that way.
What you're saying is that anybody that's an Indians fan or wears Chief Wahoo is a drunk. Is what you're basically saying.
I said that most of the people that come through here during these protests are drunks.
Would you wear blackface to an Indians game? Would you wear blackface out in public? What's the difference?
Why not? Yeah.
What's the difference? The team was Cleveland Blacks.
What would you
think that would be okay and people could wear blackface? What's the difference?
Look, I root for the Indians. All right, the mascot is Chief Wahoo. All right, whether you guys like it or not, it's going to stay.
No,
why?
It's not.
All right,
it's just a baseball logo.
That's the best part of it. It will change.
What if they change the name to
protest? You can protest those you want. I mean, Snyder in Washington's not going to change the name for the Redskins.
Wow. I can't even keep a straight face and watch that dude. It's like when life imitates art, or art is imitating life, or everything is just like, it's bizarro world to see that guy in all that face paint talking to an indigenous brother and expecting to be taken seriously. But that is that is currently where we're at. The Cleveland Indians have not totally committed to change. They're squirreling around, they're weaseling around. And when you mentioned Vernon Belcourt, I want to go back to that because I had the honor of meeting Vernon Belcourt and Clyde Belcourt in St. Cloud State, or St. Cloud State University, St. Cloud, Minnesota. They, I forget the name of the organization. It started with an E. There's that, like I said, there's been many iterations of organizing of indigenous people who just, when they're found in these situations, they say, look, this is wrong. Something needs to be done. And I just want to thank you for mentioning Vernon, because it took me right back to 1998, the first time that I met them. And these are legends. And the American Indian movement, for all of its faults and all of the criticisms hurled at the American Indian movement to this day, like for some reason, I'm always in this position where people are attacking me just because my parents were AIM. And so, but you know, we will give credit where credit is due and criticism where criticism is due. Others like Floyd Red Crow Westerman, we mentioned Vine Deloria. There's just a host of indigenous people who have given their time and their attention to making sure this practice of using our people as mascots ends. And and no matter if we put decolonization or native appropriation, or I just learned the word agency not too long ago from my daughter Tokata, who's always schooling me up on things, but we're reclaiming our agency. We're able to tell our stories again. So you know, what do you think the solution is to, because we face this in all aspects of our lives, trying to reclaim our dignity in trying to help deconstruct this settler reality that is propped up, and surviving it and navigating it. But what are some of the sources of inspiration that you might be seeing in your work or in your allyships, you know, going forward? How do you see this work evolving and playing out?
You know, I've been really inspired by some of the people I've seen on the front lines. And a lot of them are very young. A lot of them are women. And, you know, I feel like the work that I did early, you know, with the American Indian movement, and then, of course, Kwame Ture and Wilma Mankiller also came out to campus.
Yes.
And she also spoke at the same place that Kwame Ture spoke. And she says that we work so hard, you know, to lift up our children, let them be proud of who they are and learn their own history and find those heroes and sheroes within our own community. He says, but it can be crushed, you know, in an instant, you know, when they're on a campus like this, where they have this identity. So she talked about, and she was asked by the press when she was on our campus, the U of I, you know, what is the number one priority for your nation? And her answer was perfect. She said, the number one priority for our nation is to get our young people to believe in themselves again and to trust their own thinking. And if you think about that, that's what we do as educators. And those who are going, you know, like your daughter who's working on a degree, I mean, this is what we're talking about, you know, to trust their own thinking, you know.
I could not agree more. And also I'm in full recognition that Native women, indigenous women are winning elections, are reclaiming their agency, are deconstructing patriarchy, misogyny, all of the male dominated constructs that even me as a male have had to realize through my daughter. You know, that this is something that we're all going through, that we're all healing from. And I forgot, for anybody that's just joining us, Charlene Teters is Professor Emeritus at the Institute of American Indian Arts, She is featured in a documentary called In Whose Honor. She's one of the early matriarchs of this movement to de-mascotize our people. If you don't know, there are hundreds of schools, there are hundreds of organizations that use Indigenous peoples as mascots. And I just wanted to give you, Charlene, a chance to tell us what IAIA does, because a lot of people don't know that the Institute of American Indian Arts is the flagship institution for media production, for the arts, and so forth. So I just want to give you a chance to tell us what you do these days.
Well, I just retired from the academic dean position at the Institute of American Indian Arts. I'm so happy to hear you call it the flagship, of Native arts and culture, because it really is. It is one of 38 tribal colleges in the country. Ours is kind of different than the other ones. The other tribal colleges are mostly under, a particular tribe, like the Comanche Nation or the Nakota Lakota, nation, but ours is federally chartered. Our board of trustees is appointed by the President of the United States, so we're kind of special. We have several programs, studio arts, creative writing, museum studies, but we also have an incredible film program. So anybody out there who's looking to get a film degree, here's a place where you can get hands-on with some of the best in the field. So Khalil Hudson, James Lujan are, instructors there. So, and it's one of the only tribal colleges that really uses the arts and culture to develop leadership. So many of the people that come through our program go on to leadership positions. They don't necessarily need to just stay in the arts. Some of them go on to be tribal chairwomen of their tribes. So it's, the arts and cultures are very powerful. It's who we are. And that's what we fight so hard to protect.
I want to underscore that point. A lot of some of the people that I knew while I was in law school came out of IAIA, and art, the creation of art, recognizing what art is, just trying to define art will have you run in circles, have our gerbils run in circles in our minds. We talk a lot in this, in 2021 after Trump was defeated. The discourse seems to have gone from political correctness to cancel culture. And I think of the guy who was dressed up like Chief Wahoo, trying to explain himself and reason with and rationalize with an actual Native person about, he's feeling like his culture is being canceled. We've been called politically correct liberals, but we are dealing with a set of institutions that is objectifying and commodifying the Indigenous aspect. So it is important that our young people learn to trust their own thinking and to trust in their own dignity. I really want to just highlight that, because that came straight from Wilma Mankiller, rest in peace, and all of our young people who might be watching this. And thank you to everyone who stays tuned in, because to have Charlene here is no small feat. And I've always respected what you do, Charlene, and it's an honor, it's a pleasure for our listening audience to be able to kind of to hear from you tonight. Again, the documentary that features Charlene Teters and others who were involved in that work, like Vernon Belcourt, like Kwame Ture or Stokely Carmichael, it is called In Whose Honor. And if there's any other films or websites or anything that we need to get out there, Charlene. I just want to give you an opportunity to, make some closing comments, or if there's something you might have left out. I am very comfortable with what we've covered here tonight. It's a challenge. It is traumatizing to see all of those aspects live and direct on film, but it's something that we also have to go through, I feel, so that our children can rise up just a little bit higher, just stand on our shoulders a little bit more. So I want to give you a chance to close us out, Charlene.
Well, Michael Haney, worked really hard. He worked, he was sleeping on my floor and he was on the front lines doing the work. And he said that we need to do everything possible while we're here so that we don't pass this on to the next generation to have to deal with. So I'm very thankful for my mentors, Michael Haney, Vernon Belcourt, Kwame Ture, for the work that they did and for lifting me up, because I was really shy. It was hard for me to speak out back then. But we have to recognize how connected these things are. When you dehumanize a people and it's done so publicly, then, people do not respect our tribal leaders. Just like the guy in the face paint who arrogantly is arguing with a Native man. If you dehumanize a people and it's done so publicly, our young people wonder what's wrong with who we are. When you dehumanize a people and it's done so publicly like that, then, we are vulnerable to acts of racism and hate that we feel every day and sense every day in Indian country. And that's what, the missing Indigenous women movement is about, is that dehumanization leaves us vulnerable because we're seen as not quite as human as any other people.
You know what? That hits pretty hard, because you're absolutely right. When our children are having to encounter these very damaging on a foundational level, it's impacting our thought and spiritual potentiality, our self-esteem, our national esteem. It impacts how we see ourselves. And if we're denigrating ourselves based on everything that is normalized in our culture, then that is undoubtedly going to lead us to self-deprecating behavior, like suicide, like just ill health. When you're talking about your daughter studying the impacts of what some of these environments, how they impact us as Indigenous peoples, MMIW. How is it that if we are dehumanizing ourselves to that extent, then it is no wonder that we are facing challenges. But again, I just want to thank you, Charlene, and you're more than welcome to come on anytime if you got something you want to talk about. It's just, I've only got to meet you through a different panel one time. Maybe it was a couple years ago, a few years ago, I don't remember, but I've always known who you are since I began getting involved in this work at the University of North Dakota. And so I've always had just a tremendous amount of respect for you. And so if there's anything you missed, you can speak your piece. If not, we will see you again.
Thank you so much, Chase.
Thank you. Wow. That is awesome. Again, that was Charlene Teters, In Whose Honor is the name of the documentary that you can go and find to see the evolution of her work. And she is now retired and is Professor Emeritus from the Institute of American Indian Arts down in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And she reminds us, and thank you again for that, Charlene. She reminds us that Native mascots are never right. They may be permitted, they may be normalized, because sometimes they can pick off a tribe or two, like the Florida State Seminoles or the Utah Utes, who have agreed to their likeness being used at those particular universities. But that does not mean that those of us who understand differently can stop fighting, because these are situations where these are purveyors of violence, violent imagery that is damaging to the developing, impressionable self-esteem of Indigenous children, as well as damaging how society as a whole sees Indigenous peoples. And Charlene did a great job of expressing those sentiments. And some of the detractors say we got more important things to worry about, but the truth is we are worrying about every aspect of our lives, whether that's the foreign and forced dependency or imposed poverty culture, all of the ill health impacts that entails, or whether it's reclaiming our agency. Agency matters. And again, thank you to Charlene Teters. That was intense. I just want to close out tonight's show with a story about voting rights. And seriously, voting rights. It's like every show we're doing a story on how we're having to fight harder and harder to protect our most basic and sacred right to vote, the most fundamental thing to a democracy. But here we go again, and we were not lying when I said this. This is a never-ending fight for our rights and for our dignity. If you remember, I think it was Cut to the Chase number 7 or number 8. We covered Georgia's very oppressive actions, where state lawmakers, in cahoots with the governor, made it illegal to give food or water to those who were waiting in line to vote. These cats are seriously making it harder to vote. And there was a Black woman, a legislator from Georgia, who knocked on the governor's door to ensure transparency, to find out what was going on with these bills. And she was arrested. It was very a public and scandalous black mark on the state of Georgia. She is now facing 8 years in prison for knocking on the Georgia governor's door. This is a direct backlash for flipping the Senate there in the state of Georgia, with Senator Warnock and Ossoff taking office. And it's got to do with backlash from removing the wannabe dictator from the Oval Office. But anyhow, let me tell you the story about Montana control. If we could get the overlay up there in Helena, Montana. Of course, that's the capital, but the Montana House has killed legislation aimed at making it easier for Native people living on reservations to vote. Right, they killed that. The bill would have required counties to maintain an alternate election office on reservations and negotiate days and operating hours with the tribes. It also would have had tribes and counties negotiate the locations of ballot drop boxes. The bill first passed 53-47, and on a second reading Monday, it failed 48-51. Now, this bill would have required people in Montana to work together according to a settlement reached in 2014 over the nature and the effectiveness of Indigenous peoples exercising their voter rights. So I laugh sometimes when we're talking about voting rights and the struggles that we are facing, because we have to maintain our strength and our sanity and our tenacity. We cannot give in. Everything that is happening that is trying to diminish Native voting rights or oppressed people's voting rights or working people's voting rights has long-term impact. And when we organize, we win. When we liberate from those differences that were assigned to us, like race and religion and creed, and when we rise from those conditions that were set for us, we win. When we organize, we win. And that is why those who subscribe to a false European supremacy in this country are fearful and are divided and are lashing out. This is why they are shooting up Asian women. This is why they're shooting up schools. And in Boulder, Colorado, this is why they're displaying Nazi symbols and imagery, heralding Donald Trump as their new messiah, because that world has already ended. Those of us who have come through the other side of that, who respect each other's differences, know we are the majority, and this is our country. And when we organize, we win. I want to thank everyone who tunes into our show every Wednesday at 5 o'clock Mountain, 4 o'clock Pacific, 6 o'clock Central, 7 o'clock Eastern. We hope to have flyers out more than a day in advance. But for those of you who are listening, you have the inside scoop on when our show will start. Every Wednesday at 5 Mountain, I'll try to stick to that schedule. Our whole team on the other side of the curtain will try to stick to that schedule. And I just want to thank our sponsors, Lakota People's Law Project, the Romero Institute, Last Real Indians, Earthstream Media, Indigenous Peoples Movement. These are all organizations that have put us on and have allowed us to reach their audience and have allowed us to build allies in all of those networks. And no matter where you're tuning in from, please like, comment, share our material, because this material matters, and we'll always make sure to bring you hard-hitting, accurate, and honest critical thought from an Indigenous perspective, wherever it intersects with mainstream issues that are important to all of us. Again, thank you for listening. This has been Cut to the Chase number 9, and we're out.